Hang in there, it is!
Smylie Kaufman for 61. Wow.
I'm Smylie Kaufman, and this is The Smylie Show.
I'm going to bring this into golf, but it's the sports news of the week. It's just mind-blowing. The whole NBA gambling, fiasco, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to give the sort of the headline piece of the news where there are two separate things happening. There's like the Terry Rozier, if that's even how you say his last name. Fixing is not the right word, but it's effectively saying, hey, I'm going to bet the under on various prop bets associated with me because I'm going to pull myself out of this game with injury.
Someone call it fixing.
That is a form of fixing.
I'm not saying that's the definition, but
right.
I think that may have actually just been a definition of fixing.
Well, and then there's the whole separate investigation that involves NBA coaches and former players and assistants, but that is focused on rigged card games, right? So we're going to set that aside for a moment because I think that what has happened here for a lot of sports, we saw friend of the show, Adam Schefter, report on a memo that the NFL sent out to all the teams as a reminder on gambling policies is put a lot of sports on notice. You and I were talking as we prepared for the subject about Rob Manfred being asked about this on the baseball side and saying, hey, look, none of these leagues wanted gambling to come into their sport. But it was something that got legalized. It was sort of this necessary evil, probably is one way you could say it. But I think for them, if it's going to happen and we're looking at these different gambling operators, there is a net positive for us of working with them to identify databases, information on our gamblers to make sure that we know if someone is gambling on this that has a material impact on the outcome of our games. And so there's this sort of like, hey, this is where we are as a society, for better or worse, and what impact does this have on games that we love? So specific to this podcast, right, talking about golf, I did a little bit of light research here, just looking back at what can we remember in recent memory or just even in distant history of gambling and golf being intertwined in a potentially negative way. And so a lot of this comes out of things that surfaced in the year 2023. There was the book that Billy Walters published, Gambler: Secrets from a Life at Risk, where he alleges that Phil Mickelson called him from Medina during the 2012 Ryder Cup, attempting to place a $400,000 wager on the Americans to win the Cup, which good on Phil for not placing that, because this was, of course, the Miracle Medina, where the Europeans came back, one of the greatest comebacks in Ryder Cup history.
Did you read that book?
I did not read that book, but I read a lot of the excerpts from that book.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
It'd be an interesting read, right?
It would be an interesting read. I mean, I think it's one of those things where how much of an axe does Billy Walters have to grind, right? Like, does he have anything to lose by writing this book? Probably not if he's gone through all this sort of legal stuff already, but there is a little bit of, I'd like to maintain a public image. So how much of that is Billy giving you his spin and how much of that is really factual? Probably an interesting read nonetheless.
Well, let us know in the comments, folks. If you've read the book, give us a review, a little review out of 5.
Spark notes us.
Yeah, just let us know if we should read it.
So there's that, of course, but that was just an allegation. Nothing proved factually there yet. Also in 2023, 2 Korn Ferry Tour pros, Jake Staiano and Vince India, were suspended for 3 and 6 months, respectively, for violating betting rules within the Tour's integrity program. Now, India, as far as I can see or find via research, never spoke on that. But Jake Staiano, the 3-month suspension.
I don't know who that is. Jake Staiano?
Well, it's funny bringing this full circle. After the suspension, he played on the PGA Tour Americas this last year, made 16 starts and finished 34th in the Fortinet Cup standings. Only the top 10 earned their Korn Ferry Tour cards. So he's still playing, but on PGA Tour Americas. So Jake went on Ryan French's podcast, you probably better know as Monday Q Info on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And discussed, and he was suspended 3 months for a total of $116.20 of bets. He placed a $25 bet on Bryson DeChambeau to make birdie on a par 5 in a PGA Tour event in 2021, and then 3 other bets on DeChambeau during that match he played with Brooks Koepka. And so he said, this is his quote on the podcast: "I understand the principles. I understand you can't bet. They laid it out perfectly. I didn't deny gambling. I've accepted my punishment. It is what it is. Fair or not, people can argue that, but one of my biggest things is I want to make sure other guys understand exactly what happened so they don't make the same mistake, because it could be career altering." So interesting perspective from a guy who really didn't gamble that much, and the tour came down very hard on him via the policy they had. Mardy Fish, this was an interesting one. This is at the 2023 American Century Championship in Tahoe, the celeb event you've covered the last 2 years. He was kind of in the running there, contending with Steph Curry coming down the stretch.
I remember this one. I remember this.
Spectator makes a bird call noise in the middle of his backswing. He snap hooks it.
Is it the same bird call guy from the Webb Simpson deal at Olympic? Same guy?
It's funny you say that because that was my first guess. It's like, is this bird guy? He's popping around. He's maintaining he's extending his 15 seconds of fame.
Why a bird call? You know,
I know. And honestly, I would have never thought anything of it until Marty later goes on Ryan Russillo's podcast and says he found out that the heckler had bet on Steph Curry, and a little bit of foreshadowing here, wondered why something like this hadn't happened more often in the game of golf. And so then a few months later, 2023 BMW Championship, Max Homa was paired with Chris Kirk. Chris Kirk plays first. A fan shouts at him to leave his 18-foot birdie putt short. And then in the middle of Max Homa's putting stroke, yells at him to yank his 5-foot birdie putt. Max makes it. They exchange words. After the round, Max is asked about it. He said that they gathered from the guy's friend, they had $3 riding on that bet for that birdie putt. And Max said his quote was, "I love that people can gamble on golf, but this is one thing I'm worried about." And then just to kind of close these, and then I want to pose a series of questions to you. But then a week later, Rory McIlroy and Jon Rahm were asked at the 2023 Tour Championship about that Max incident. Rory says, "We've talked about this at the board and the pack level for a few years, and it's a bit of a slippery slope because I don't think there's any, maybe basketball and you can sit courtside, but I think it's a different environment where people can really affect the play out here. So look, as long as it's policed the right way and as long as there's measures put in place for hopefully things like what happened to Max Homa last Saturday not to happen, we're all for people out here having a good time, being able to put something on an outcome. But as long as they don't feel like they can come here and influence that outcome, I think that's important." Rahm went on to say, "I think the tour maybe should look into it because you don't want it to get out of hand. It's very easy in golf. If you want to affect somebody, you're so close. You can yell at the wrong time, and it's very easy for that to happen. I feel like we hear it every single round. That happens way more often than you guys may hear. I mean, it's very, very present. And golf spectators are very close. And even if they're not directly talking to you, they're close enough to where if they say they're buddy, I bet you $10 he's going to miss it. You hear it, so it happens more often than you think." So, Smylie, here's where I want to start. Is just on the competitor side, right? Because this is the whole issue that's stemming from the NBA situation, is that we know that you all played money games dang near every time you had a practice round set up. I mean, that's
a good point. Yeah, I mean, gambling is a big part of golf, right? That's
so. But did you ever feel a worry or concern that a player's gambling habit was bleeding into the actual competition?
Did I ever think a player's gambling habit was bleeding into the competition?
Like the real part of the competition, not, hammer quarters you're playing with the guys, or not a Nassau. Like when we're getting to the actual tournament, some guy's gambling habit was having a material impact on a tour event. Did you ever have a worry like that?
Where the player is gambling out on the course?
No, I mean, just any sort of, effectively what I'm trying to understand is that there are clearly a number of guys. There was Jonte Porter now has been banned for life in the NBA. You have Terry Rozier. There are other guys.
Oh, you're saying, do you think golfers could ever fix?
Did you ever have any sort of worry in that direction?
No, golf. It seems, I mean, crazier things will happen, but it seems like that would never be a worry of mine for a player because it's so cutthroat, like these guys have guaranteed salaries on the PGA Tour. You don't, your fight, every single shot is so important. Every week is so important. Maybe I guess a scenario that you can play out in your head, if somebody locks up their card, there's no worry about them losing their card. That would be the player that you could say that would be more susceptible to like, no, these guys take a lot of pride in what they do. And I don't think the five families are necessarily quite into the golf scene quite yet. We talk about the mob, so I don't see it. And when you kind of mentioned too the rules and regulations that the PGA Tour has, it's clearly black and white. When you just talked about, a Korn Ferry Tour player, Jake, I can't even remember his name. Yeah, Staiano. $25 bets. I think most people would say like that's a very low wager, like a non-effective wager that anybody should have any concern, whether that should have any effect on any outcome or if you got a tip. Your biggest worry would be is if a player has like inside information. and that's when they're gambling. And so a $25 wager wouldn't necessarily sound the alarm bells, but there's the PGA Tour definitely has very, very strict rules and regulations. It's something that's you got to sign, before every single year, what you're signed up for when it comes to just the gambling regulations that they have. But you also think about the finances that the PGA Tour have, the networks have, even just players having individual deals with these gambling companies too. That's constantly something that's being put in front of consumers. Hey, if they get you, if you hit the green here, these are the odds. So it's constantly being floated on broadcasts. It's being talked about too. Even with the PGA Tour, they have their own individual deals with different gambling outlets too. So it's one of those tough situations because there's so much money in gambling that the gambling companies are spending with these different leagues that it puts the players in really tough spots because really they are the ones that get the negative effects from consumers gambling on me versus Charlie. And we're the ones that have to deal with the negative backlash of playing bad that day. It's like, hey, you suck. It's like, I put you in my lineup or I had you head to head. So really the players get the backlash of it all. And I guess it's important because the more eyeballs that watch the sport, the better. And unfortunately, sometimes that means gambling, and that's what keeps people's attention. As right or wrong as that is, it's true.
We've had gambling companies sponsor our show at various intervals, and so we're not here, as some sort of moral police saying, what's right or what's wrong. I just think more so in thinking about the specific topic and this piece of news, the first place my brain goes to is, should I be worried about this on a golf level? And I think you've done a good job of segmenting this of what potential places of worry could we have. And the first one, which you stated, I think is the most important, which is these guys are they're contractors. They are not on a guaranteed salary, at least in most leagues. But I mean, the ones that are playing every week in, week out to keep their tour cards, even if a guy was in deep with some bookie, it doesn't really behoove that bookie to have that guy play bad and play his way off the tour if he's trying to use him as some sort of gambling pawn. There's no math here that results in have player play bad intentionally, in my opinion, at least from as far as what I can see. And so, and these guys are on a week in, week out basis, needing to continue to play good to make the money they need to earn. If they're playing poorly, that really doesn't help them in any way, shape, or form. I also think too that where we started this topic is there is a sort of ethos of the game of golf of, even if it's a friendly dollar wager, gambling's been a part of golf since the game was invented, right? And it's always about betting on yourself, right? I mean, every time I go out and play Hope Valley with the buddies, we have a game going, and it's never okay, let me hedge this here so I can bet against myself so I can throw this thing. It's always, hey, put money on yourself to play good, and it feels like that is the ethos at a tour pro level and these practice rounds, things like that. So I think that it's hard to see guys changing a mindset or mentality away from that, given that their whole life it's been that's sort of the way they're playing the game. The third thing is the fan thing, which I do have serious worries about. I mean, I'm actually kind of surprised in going back and doing this research that since 2023, there hasn't really been any sort of material issue. I did see a couple things at 2024 in the U.S. Open. Someone told Bryson they had him to shoot to post a score under 70.5. They had Victor Hovland to make a cut. They yelled it to him across the ropes, something like that, but nothing that was as egregious as what we saw at the 2023 BMW Championship. But as gambling does become more and more ingrained in the sport, in every sport really, do you have concerns either that have been voiced by tour pros you talk to or other people in the space that hey, this hasn't been a thing yet, but this might start to be a thing pretty soon?
Well, I think the fans can get up close and personal and can affect play. So that definitely would be an issue that you would be concerned about. But also you got to think about this, if you put yourself in that scenario as a fan, kind of awkward to try to do that, right? If you're really close up and you got all these people around you, and next thing you know, you're yelling at somebody's backswing, dude, everybody's going to look at you. It's going to be the most awkward you've ever felt in your entire life. What are you going to do? Just run? It's also a peer pressure of, wow, that's the stupidest thing I've ever done. You can't just get away with it. Everybody's going to know who it was. It's golf. It's not like everybody's talking to where you can just get away with, yelling something stupid. So yes, in theory, you could see that it could potentially happen, but I don't see it being just this widespread issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I do in some ways. It's funny coming off our discussion about Bethpage. It does connect back to like, how do we handle game growth? Like, does this connect back to, there wasn't a ton of shame from some things we heard at Bethpage. So you wonder how far that's gone. And that's my only concern in that direction. But the hope is that, hey, if you have a bunch of people who you're bringing to the game and you're saying, this is the way the game goes, this is how you act as a fan, this is how you play the game when you're kind of wagering with your friends. The hope is that those things become ingrained, and then you don't get the type of person that has no shame and is going out there yelling at people. And
it's an individual sport. There's so many different players playing every single week. You got teams that constantly players are, I should say, spectators are cheering for or against. I mean, with so many different individual players playing, gambling is the only way that could really make its way into this to make it to where it's a problem.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's something obviously everyone's going to keep an eye on now. But I do really, I know we just touched on it briefly here, and we'll see what comes in the future. But I do really feel good about the state of professional golf relative to other leagues in terms of this permeating it and becoming a problem. I think that there's not a ton to worry about there.
Quick question. Did the $25 bet hit? Do we know?
They didn't say that in the report. I was actually hoping for a little more detail on the like.
Was it like a parlay?
The one thing I'll say about Jake Staiano is, like, if you're live betting the match, let's get you some help, buddy. Like, if you're live betting on Brooks Koepka,
my whole thing is
if
I was caught in a situation like this, it would have been much better if I had just either hit the bets and had, maybe they're like $200 bets. Like, man, guys absolutely throwing some heavy cash out there. Like, guys serious about what he does, and he's hitting his bets. So you get a little street cred from the golf audience. Like, all right, all of a sudden I like this guy. He's put $200 on Bryson to drive the green at the 7th hole. I like that. This guy.
Yeah. Well, listen, he's on a Korn Ferry Tour budget. I think we'll give him a pass, but it's certainly interesting, Smylie.
I'm certainly not shaming a $25 bet. Here, I'm not going to do that. We're not shaming anybody that's throwing a little wager out on a game. It's just a shame that he did it in something that he probably didn't know he couldn't do it in.
I listen to this podcast. It's really cool. And
all of our lovely fans and subscribers, but make sure you like and subscribe.
It's cool to see what you guys are doing. I know golf fans appreciate it, but we do too, so please keep it up.
For all the good people of YouTube, like and subscribe.
You guys have some good takes, so I'm happy to come on and shoot the